Welcome everyone. It's great to be here with you. Happy New Year, first of all. Hope you had fun and wise celebrations. If you celebrated New Year's Eve last night, and we begin a new year, it's a nice time to to reflect on. And reflect on the year ahead and think of what's important to us, and I'll be kind of connect that with what I'm going to be talking about today. And just a warm welcome to everyone, and particularly if you're here for the first time, and it's lovely to have you with us. If you want to introduce yourself in the chat, please feel free to do that. And great to see so many friends, some quite long time friends. Spiritual friends here, and as many of you know, I've been gone for seems like a long time, but I just in a word, I just found I was teaching throughout the pandemic, and even when I went away, I didn't really go away, and I just kind of the stress and the kind of anxiety built up, and then I took this long road trip, which was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, and I just really needed to take some time to rest, rejuvenate, renew, and I really had the chance to do that, and maybe talk in more detail another time about that, but I come back feeling very, very much not just kind of better, not just where I was, say, 9 months ago or a year ago, but kind of with a lot more of a sense of ease and well-being and freedom, and some of the things I'm be talking about today and in the coming weeks. So it really is good to be back. And for those who are new or newer, this is classes sponsored by the Insight Meditation Community Washington, IMCW, and our local kind of expression of that, when we were meeting in person in Northwest DC in Tenleytown, the Center for Mindful Living, which has, created, as a physical space about 10, 12 years ago, and then, as much else did, became a virtual space during COVID, and we don't have a physical space, but hopefully sometime we will go back to having some sessions in person, and looking forward to that. But we'll definitely keep the online component going, since so many, quite a lot of folks are from kind of quite distant places, and so sometimes Europe, but definitely a lot of the US and Canada, and so that's who we are, and I'm Hugh Byrne, and I've been teaching with IMCW for a couple of decades, and yes, it really is good to be back and be together today as the new year begins. As I say, a nice time to kind of reflect on what's important to us and what we want to kind of bring into the light and focus our attention, our awareness on in the weeks and months ahead. So, as I was saying at the beginning, we'll begin with a meditation, a talk, and then Emily will lead us in some movement, and then we'll come back together again and just for some sharing, and then a meditation and announcements to finish. So again, maybe we'll just we'll begin with a meditation. So just invite you to settle where you are. Find a posture that's comfortable and relaxed. So if you're comfortable, you could let your eyes close, let the attention come inward. inviting the shoulders to relax. See if you can let the muscles soften and relax a little. Let the attention come down into the body. Feel your body where you are, on the cushion, on the chair. Feel the weight of your body pressing down on your buttocks, on your thighs. Maybe connect with your breath. Sense how your breathing is right now. The breath is a wonderful barometer of kind of just our state of well-being, stress, ease. Just checking in, feeling the breath. It's breath that connects us with life. In-breath and the out-breath. If it's helpful, you might just take a few longer, deeper breaths. Filling the lungs, filling the chest. And releasing, letting go on the out-breath. Imagine you're releasing any tension, any stresses, tightness as you breathe out. Breathing in, calming the body. Breathing out, calming the mind. Letting yourself be here now. You might consciously put aside thoughts of the future, thoughts of the past, thoughts about things that are going on elsewhere, and just let your attention rest here in the body, with your breathing. This moment, just as it is. This moment without judgment. This moment in the heart space, where everything that is welcome. As Dorothy Hunt says. So with an intention to be as fully here as you can be this morning, you might invite an attitude of kindness, of friendliness to whatever is present for you right now. Whatever bodily feelings are here, coming, going. Whatever mood or emotions come along. Whatever comes along, sounds, images, thoughts. As Rumi says, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. Just cultivating an attitude of acceptance to whatever is here right now, whatever's coming along, whatever's visiting. See if you can meet it with acceptance. With curiosity, with interest. What is this? This feeling, this emotion? Can I make space for it? And as a way of helping you be here, be present, can be useful to have a focus for our attention. One of the most common and most helpful for many is just to be aware of our breathing, be aware of the body breathing without doing anything with the breath, without controlling it or changing it, but just allowing it to be as it is. The in-breath and the out-breath. And as you breathe in, just know that you're breathing in. And as you breathe out, know that you're breathing out. And when you become aware that the mind has gone off somewhere else, and begun to think about the future or the past or something going on, or something that's happened, no need to make that a problem. Just gently, kindly, let the attention come back. In breath and out breath. See the mind going off as part of the meditation, part of the practice, not something we're doing wrong or something somehow we're failing at meditation. Just natural for the mind to habitually go off, take care of business, worry about things, plan things. You can choose to make a choice to come back. choose to come back. Just meeting whatever's present with the quality of kindness, acceptance. You might feel yourself here with all of us together, practicing together. You feel the support of everyone else who's here. I share Eileen's blessing from John O'Donoghue. To come home to yourself, may all that is unforgiven in you be released. May your fears yield their deepest tranquillities. May all that is unlived in you blossom into a future graced with love. John O'Donoghue. Share this poem. It's also a blessing. So, called Blessing for the Longest Night by Jan Richardson. all throughout these months, as the shadows have lengthened, this blessing has been gathering itself, making ready, preparing for this night. It has practiced walking in the dark, traveling with its eyes closed, feeling its way by memory, by touch, by the pull of the moon, even as it wanes. So believe me when I tell you this blessing will reach you, even if you have not light enough to read it. It will find you even though you cannot see it coming. You will know the moment of its arriving by your release of the breath you have held so long, a loosening of the clenching in your hands, of the clutch around your heart, a thinning of the darkness that had drawn itself around you. This blessing does not mean to take the night away, but it knows its hidden roads, knows the resting spots along the path, knows what it means to travel in the company of a friend. So when this blessing comes, take its hand, get up, set out on the road you cannot see. This is the night when you can trust that any direction you go, you will be walking toward the dawn. So you might take your time coming back into the collective space, the opening up to the world around us. So welcome everyone, and welcome those who joined us during the meditation. Good to see you, Pat, and Karen, everyone. Got a nice group today. Good. Karimera, good to see you again, and Paul, everyone who's here today. Welcome, everyone. So today and in the coming days, coming Sundays that I'll be teaching, and I'll mention I'll be teaching mainly the first and the third Sundays for the coming months. Regina will be teaching the fourth Sunday, and we'll be having guest teachers on the second. That's typically, we will have some, there will be some variation, but that's kind of the game plan, as it were. I didn't mention the World Cup. Wasn't it fun for those who watched it? Enjoyed it immensely, particularly the final. Anyway, so as we're beginning the year, I've been thinking a lot about well-being, about wellness, about reducing, alleviating stress and worry and anxiety and all of that. And I've been kind of reflecting some about the relationship between kind of wellness, well-being on the one hand, and the Buddha's teachings of awakening. I'm going to talk about those kind of somewhat as separate paths. And maybe where a place to begin would be kind of to reflect on what are the goals of our practice. What are the purposes for coming along to a class like this? Or another class, a mindfulness class, or something in the workplace, or a mindfulness-based stress reduction class. What are we looking for? What are the goals of our practice? If I were to ask you all today, what brings you here? Maybe not so much just today, but what brings you to come regularly to a class like this, or to practice yourself, meditate regularly or practice mindfulness. There'd likely be a range of responses, I think. And if you feel like sharing why you come, why is it important to you, please feel free to share that in the chat, and maybe we'll kind of share some of that as I'm talking. But my assumption would be, from my experience, some people come because I want some more peace in my life. I want less stress, less anxiety. I want to be able to work with my emotions better, or my feelings better. I'd like greater ease. Some might say, well, I want the freedom that the Buddha's pointing to. I'd like a life free of suffering. Maybe not the full Monty of the Buddha's awakening, but some expression of that, some expression of the freedom that the Buddha points to as possible in this very life. I'm interested right now in this. In general, I'm interested in this question because it makes a lot of difference to us. In terms of we have to. It's important to get to know where we're going if we want to get somewhere. Yogi Berra famously said, "If you don't know where you're going, you'll end up someplace else." And I think that Yogi was wise about that. It's also, I think of, if you're teaching, if somebody like me or other teachers teaching meditation, teaching mindfulness, it's important to know who we're teaching and what we're teaching. What are we teaching for? Are we teaching primarily to help people reduce stress and worry and reduce, cultivate some level of well-being, some level of wellness? Or are we teaching people about the possibility of ending suffering in this, completely in their lives, or at least having that potential, having that as a goal? And how do we see, if we, make a contrast, if we look at that path of greater well-being or less stress and worry, and the other, the awakening that the Buddha points to, is this just one and the same path, or are they completely separate paths, completely separate goals? From the standpoint of teaching, are we teaching everything to everyone and letting people take what they find helpful? Is it the same? If you were teaching, the goal of teaching was to help people find freedom from suffering, would it be the same, the same teaching, the same language? If people were there for, just some well-being in their life, some greater well-being, or some less stress in their life, more peace, that kind of thing. I hope I'm making clear to some extent what I'm getting at. It'll become clearer as I continue. But here's what I want to put forward in this talk and in some coming talks on this broad area. Maybe give this the title of the paths of wellness and awakening. Paths of wellness and awakening, making a kind of a distinction there between these two. And I think it's helpful to distinguish between two distinct goals or types of goals. We could call it two distinct paths, perhaps. One, a path of or a goal of well-being. Include their wellness, mental health, emotional well-being, less stress and anxiety on one hand, and a path of awakening that promises freedom from suffering in this life. The Buddhist path with the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path and the Four Foundations of Mindfulness and the other teachings that point to freedom. And so I think it's helpful to look at these as, at least as distinct paths, not that they don't have anything to do with each other, because I'm going to argue they have a lot to do with each other. But that the relationship is an important one. I think it's a very helpful one to explore. I think it's very helpful to explore what the relationship between these two kind of modes are, these two paths, these two kind of broad goals, wellness on one hand and awakening on the other. And I think where I'd like to begin is by kind of putting out some broad, maybe models would be the word, of the goal or the path of wellness or well-being, and how that path may be distinguishable from the Buddhist path or the broad path of awakening. And I'll focus on three models, if you like. They have something in common with each other, but they're, sufficiently distinct, and kind of talks somewhat broadly about them. And what I'll talk about, one is the path of psychotherapy. I know there's a number of therapists here today, and I'm not going to, I'm going to make some kind of very general points about that and the relationship to the Buddhist path of awakening. The second is secular mindfulness, what we associate with mindfulness-based stress reduction, John Kabat-Zinn's programs, and all the things that have come out of that, wonderful expressions of secular mindfulness. How does that relate to the Buddha's path of awakening? And then kind of broad approaches to wellness that aren't necessarily therapy and aren't necessarily, focused expressly on mindfulness, but are about cultivating well-being more generally. Wellness from a standpoint of emotional wellness, physical, social, lots of other ways that we can express wellness. So I'll begin with saying a few things about, if you like, the path of psychotherapy. And just to, maybe say generally, we might say some of the goals, not one as therapists, I'm sure could say much better than I can. There's not one set of goals that you can say, psychotherapy is this. But obviously some of the goals are to reduce distressing symptoms, reduce anxiety and depression, to get to understand our emotions better, and how our patterns develop from attachment, early attachment, and how they can affect our lives, and how by getting to know those patterns better that we can find our way out of distress to some, maybe some significant extent. how we can improve emotional and social functioning, how we can overall improve life satisfaction. Probably say a lot more than that, but just kind of not wanting to put forward any definition, but just the general kind of orientation. I'll come back, and there's a fairly well-known quote from Freud. I thought I could. I thought there was a whiteboard on here somewhere. Maybe Dan, if you could, if you could see if I have the quotes I'm going to share. If I can't do it here, I'll share them afterwards through the CML. But Freud said, "I do not doubt that it would be easier for fate to take away your suffering than it would for me, for him to take away the person's suffering. But you will see for yourself that much has been gained if we succeed in turning your hysterical misery into common unhappiness. With a mental life that has been restored to health, you will be better armed against that unhappiness." So that idea of turning hysterical misery into common unhappiness, you can think of it as, it seems like a fairly low bar. The goal is common unhappiness. Things have obviously moved on a lot from Freud over 130 whatever years ago. I think he said that. But maybe you could describe Freud's goal of therapy as coping better with the suffering of life. Being able to cope more adequately with, being a human being and being alive, and the ways that we can do this. And this is a very different goal than Buddha's goal, end of the path, which is, that we can end suffering in this life completely. Not that we end pain or difficulty, but the unnecessary suffering we can end. That it's possible if we end clinging, that we can find an end to suffering. We can live with, complete freedom, which is something, I think we'd all acknowledge is something different from the goal of well-being or dealing with the stresses and depression, and as much as we can through approaches like through therapy. Bruce Tift, who's a psychologist and teacher and author of a book called Already Free, Buddhism Meets Psychotherapy on the Path of Liberation. He explores the nexus, the connection between psychotherapeutic approaches and Buddhist teachings. And he calls the therapy approach, he calls the developmental view. And he calls the Buddhist approach the fruitional view. The fruitional view. That therapy is concerned with, how we gained our neuroses and how we can work more skillfully with them, and so that they cause us less suffering, or the patterns that we create in our lives. And then it doesn't, promise that suffering can be completely ended in this life. Whereas the Buddhist approach does. The Buddha's teachings of awakening are that we can truly end suffering in this life. And Tift's own view, his own approach when working with clients and students, he says, I alternate between a Buddhist approach and a psychotherapeutic approach without any hope of resolution, is how he puts it. Not that there's going to be some great grand synthesis that will be able to bring it all together, that they're kind of two different modalities, two different paths that both have something very skillful to offer. So I just leave that there, just in kind of very broad terms, and then say something about some things about secular mindfulness. We can see a distinction again between the goals of secular mindfulness, relieving stress and anxiety, and broadly living more living more freely. Secular mindfulness is associated very much with John Kabat-Zinn's work in the last 40 years, which, developing mindfulness-based stress reduction, which comes out of the Buddha's teachings, but kind of takes the part of the teachings, particularly around mindfulness, that can be shared more broadly in a secular way without including, at least explicitly including, the whole range of the Buddha's teachings of awakening. So MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reduction, isn't promising, awakening in this life or complete freedom from suffering. It's basically offering something, maybe akin to therapy, without the one-on-one relationship, but similar, an alleviation of stress and anxiety. Working more skillfully with pain, with physical pain, chronic pain, for example, to be able to, even if we can't do anything about, from a medical standpoint, or change it very much medically, that we can change our relationship to the pain, and that will allow us greater ease, well-being, peace, etc. And out of mindfulness-based stress reduction have come many different programs, wonderful programs, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, mindfulness-based relapse prevention for those in recovery, addiction and recovery. Mindful self-compassion is a program coming out of, broadly based on MBSR, as well as programs of mindful eating and, mindful all sorts of things, mindful driving, mindful sex, many more. And these, as I mentioned, these mindfulness programs have their origins in the Buddha's teachings, and they use, the same or some of the same technologies. There's I mentioned in a message I sent out to on the CML listserv, and more broadly through my lists, teacher, professor at the University of Toronto, John Vervaeke, who has I found a very, very profound program on YouTube of lectures on awakening from the meaning crisis. The crisis of what does it mean to be human and to be alive today, and the crises of the environment and political, deep political divisions between us, and how do we cope with these times. And he really comes back to the need to bring together the wisdom of that's come through both in the West and in the East, of how we need to transform ourselves in order to transform the world. And he uses the term, he didn't invent the term, but he talks about psychotechnologies, which are basically means that allow us to do things in the world in a more effective and more skillful way. Language is a psychotechnology. Mindfulness in that way is a psychotechnology. So anyway, that's just a little bit to the side. But so the secular mindfulness uses the same technologies of mindfulness, of meditation, and the practices and skills um, that come from the Buddha's teachings and are grounded. The secular mindfulness, MBSR, etc., is grounded in the same goal as the Buddhist teachings of gaining greater freedom. But it's more freedom from stress and anxiety. It's not that larger goal of freedom from suffering that the Buddha points to, complete freedom. So that's another kind of modality where the path is quite different from the Buddha's goal, the Buddha's path of awakening, but obviously has a lot in common with it. I'll mention as well briefly here, and I'll talk in more depth in the next session, next class in a couple of weeks on this, but we can also look at more general frameworks of wellness, of cultivating wellness, and how they as well offer a more limited goal, but maybe best to say goals, more limited goals, but still very, very important goals. The difference between living in a pretty fulfilled and happy way in the world versus life feeling like it's a mess and we're stressed or we're depressed or we're anxious. And so I'll speak about some frameworks of wellness that have 6 or 7 or 8 elements, and probably others as well. But I'll focus on 8 elements of wellness, where if we cultivate these different areas of well-being in our lives, we will be well set to live a pretty happy life. But again, it's not the freedom from suffering that the Buddha's pointing to. It's being in the world and coping in a happier, more effective way, better relationships with our loved ones, with our friends, etc., better able to deal with the ups and downs of life. And one approach with 8 elements includes emotional wellness, physical wellness, social wellness. I'll talk next time about pulling these apart more, but just naming them for now. Social wellness, connection with friends, family, etc. Occupational wellness, where our work or whatever it is we do, volunteering, whatever we do, how does that fit in to our life as a whole? Financial wellness, kind of that speaks for itself, being able to plan our life in a way, the resources that we have and budget, etc., in a way that supports our overall well-being. Environmental wellness, linking our life with the larger, the world outside, the nature, particularly where we are with the climate crisis now, but also on a more immediate level, our living situation, living with in fairly pleasant surroundings that support well-being rather than, being, hemmed in by all of our papers and all of our stuff. Also, spiritual wellness, which again kind of speaks for itself, cultivating qualities that will help us, connect with our values and what's meaningful to us in our lives. And intellectual wellness, what inspires our curiosity. So I'll share these, in more depth on these, and I'll just share the list later. If I solve the mystery of the whiteboard. It's my new technology that I'm just beginning to work with, that Zoom has a much more, better whiteboard for sharing things, but I'll find a way of doing it today, I think, and certainly by next time. So anyway, we can see these. I mention as well that the Buddha himself, when he taught in his lifetime, he taught in a different way to householders, lay people, than he did to monastics. That he, oh, look at that. I see. Okay. I don't know where it is. But anyway, I have a whiteboard with a lot of my stuff on for today, but we'll find it. The Buddha himself taught about he made a distinction. He would teach in a different way for lay people, for householders. He'd teach in a way that was connected with the things they had to do in their lives, their families, their work, the village, whatever. And he'd teach to monastics in a different way, who'd given up all of the worldly things and could really focus on the Dharma, And so there's a distinction. It's not quite exactly on between the monastics and householders, but between what the Buddha called the mundane path and the supra mundane path. The mundane path being more about generosity and about living a kind of a good life, living a selfless life, but not freedom from suffering entirely. Being kind, being generous, behaving well, being ethical. And then the supramundane path, which was about seeing into the deeper truth about life and letting go, finding freedom from suffering. And the Buddha focused more with the monastics on the supramundane path, and with the lay people on every day, how to live ethically, how to be generous, how to be kind, how to cultivate these kind of qualities. So I think it's not hard to see the distinction between these goals of therapy, of wellness, of secular mindfulness, the distinction between those and the goals and the path of awakening. But I also think you can see them on a continuum, that they're distinct in that they have different ends, of everyday well-being, as it were, or freedom from some of the stresses of life and the distresses of life on one hand, and complete freedom from suffering on the other. So they point to different ends, but the insights and understanding that we gain in psychotherapy, for example, being able to see more clearly the patterns that we've created out of our early life attachment patterns that kind of get us into trouble when they're unconscious, but when they're elevated, when they're brought into the light, can help us. Oh, I can see now. Now I can make changes because I can see more clearly that the patterns that I created no longer are serving me. So there's the insights and the understanding we gain through psychotherapy, getting to know ourselves better, lessening stress and anxiety and depression and other conditions. That these can be powerful tools on the path of awakening. So even though they may be more about everyday well-being, that they can be very important and perhaps essential on the path of awakening. And I'll touch on a couple of ways I think they can be essential. We can see an even more perhaps direct continuum with the secular mindfulness and the Buddha's teachings. The same core practices of mindfulness and meditation, though the focus and the end, the goal being different for each. Similarly, with the broader path of wellness, we can see if we somewhat look at it the other way as well. If we want to if we want to lead a healthy, balanced, and fulfilled life, the practices of awakening, the practices of mindfulness, self-compassion, loving kindness, awareness, are being seen as important in that, in cultivating well-being. Within therapy, mindfulness has become much more of a central focus in the last, whatever it is, 20, 25 years. In wellness more generally, mindfulness, and some self-compassion is another, quality that's seen as more and more seen as essential. And I believe they are essential to leading a healthy, balanced, and fulfilled life. And at the same time, from the other standpoint, addressing one's attachment patterns and how they can cause us suffering, as well as working with unresolved trauma that we may be carrying and holding, may actually be essential to help create the conditions for awakening. That without dealing with those areas, it can be very difficult to go deeply enough into ourselves and our own experiences. And people find themselves in crises, for example, going on a long retreat and getting to a very, very deep places of peace and well-being, really deep, and then feeling a sense of groundlessness, but then touching into something that hasn't been examined before, some unresolved trauma, something that's happened that's maybe so much deep in unconsciousness that it's never or rarely been brought to the light. And it can arise when you're in a state of groundlessness. I'm not saying this happens a whole lot, but it definitely happens where it can lead to, real, pretty significant, what the best word for it is, discombobulation, distress, real distress, when if something just kind of comes out at those times when we're feeling really groundless. So there's this very real relationship between the path, these broad paths we might call paths of wellness, and the Buddha's teachings of awakening. I come back a lot to and share a lot Ajahn Chah's well-known saying. He said, "Do everything with a mind that lets go. Don't accept praise or gain or anything else. If you let go a little, you'll have a little peace. If you let go a lot, you'll have a lot of peace. If you let go completely, you'll have complete peace. Your struggle with the world will be at an end." So in a way, Ajahn Chah there is pointing, I think, to some of the ways in which, therapy and secular mindfulness and wellness more generally can certainly help us let go a little, perhaps let go a lot. But they typically aren't the paths towards letting go completely. That, and not saying, those things, that kind of insight and awakening can happen at any time. So I'm not saying it couldn't happen through those means, but typically, the more we can go deeper and deeper into the practice of meditation, into mindfulness practices, and the other skillful practices, the 7 factors of awakening and other skillful Dharma practices, tend to be very, very conducive to that deeper letting go that the Buddha points to. So those so arguably then the work we do in therapy with secular mindfulness, wellness more broadly, can lead to a letting go that at least points to the deeper letting go that Ajahn Chah identifies with as the end of the path. So I'll finish off just for time today in the next few minutes. But one way of looking at this relationship, what Tift calls the developmental and the fruitional, or secular mindfulness, and the Dharma, the Buddha's teachings of awakening, was well stated by Ram Dass in his unique way. He said, once you have become somebody, then you're ready to start the journey to becoming nobody. You might have heard that before. Once you've become somebody, then you're ready to start the journey to become nobody. And, it's a kind of broad way of saying it, but there's some, I think, important truth in it that, you need to create a good functional self in order to let go of the self. That's the kind of another way of saying it, you need some, you can't be completely, lost in not knowing who you are. That's not going to be a good ground for letting go of self completely. I think Ram Dass is right. You've got to develop some coherent and authentic sense of self in order to be able to really see into the way in which self is constructed, and that there isn't, as the Buddha's teachings kind of point to, there isn't this solid self, this kind of permanent self that we have. So you could see then that the goal of, you might say, optimal well-being, everyday well-being, as preliminary practices for the goal of awakening, that there are, on this continuum. So I think one thing we can say, I would definitely say, is it's for each one of us to choose what the goal of our practice is. Do we want to let go a little? Do we want to let go a lot? Do we want to let go completely? And the Buddha offered, as I said, distinct teachings, to lay people from those offered to monastics. But all the teachings that the Buddha offered, and he offered freely, were predicated on each one of us having the capacity to wake up, not just monastics, but all of us having the capacity to wake up and experience freedom. And he said, all the teachings have one taste, the taste of freedom. And he uses this metaphor. He says, it's a simile. Just as the great ocean has one taste, the taste of salt, so also this teaching and discipline has one taste, the taste of liberation. So that notion of one taste, that all of the teachings have one taste. And I definitely, for myself personally, subscribe to the view that that insight is possible no matter what the goal of the path is. Excuse me. No matter what the end of the path that you see, or the goal of the path that you see, that insight is possible, that letting go is possible at any time, through any of the practices. Certainly, I taught MBSR for 10 years and love to teach, both secular mindfulness practices and, the Buddha's teachings of Dharma. And I think as Ajahn Chah says, the insight, the awakening is the same. The only difference is that the Buddha's teachings are pointing explicitly and leading explicitly to the goal, the ultimate goal of the path, whereas the other paths are not pointing to that ultimate goal, but are really focused on the more limited goal. So in this way, I think the teachings, the relationship can be seen, in a sense, as a continuum. But I think, I was thinking about this, and I was talking to a friend about these classes, and I'm thinking, maybe even a better, I mean, the metaphor of a continuum, the metaphor, but the image of a continuum, something that's continuing and gradual and, potentially leading to the same end, maybe a helpful way of seeing it. But I think perhaps even more helpful might be the idea, the metaphor of a spiral, or the image of a spiral, that we will continue to encounter the same things probably over and over again in our lives. We won't encounter them necessarily in the same way. But if we have a path, whether it be the path of therapy or the path of secular mindfulness or of wellness more generally, a path that helps us bring what is unconscious into consciousness, that helps us deal effectively with where we're stuck, where we're suffering. If we have that path, that training, if you like, whatever that is, then the spiral can be a virtuous cycle where maybe the same things are coming back again. If from the Buddhist standpoint, there's some karmic energy to them, or some habit energy, that they do come round again, but they can come round in ways that are less and less. The more we're dealing with the subject matter, what has to be worked with, the less problematical they will be when they return again. From a standpoint of karma, if we're bringing our unconscious things into the light, and we're gaining insight, and we're able to let go, it doesn't mean that energy doesn't come round again, but it will come round in a much less troubling way in the future. And what the Buddha's path points to is this spiral being the image for the Buddha really is the path of training, is the Eightfold Path. But if we see even the Eightfold Path being a spiral where we're developing more sometimes the ethical qualities in our lives, so that those are strengthened and they support the other areas of our lives. And then we're developing the mindfulness and the concentration and the wise effort. And we're at the same time, we're cultivating wisdom and skillful intentions, and they're all supporting each other. And so the image, I think, of the spiral is for me is quite a helpful one. That we're continuing to grow and learn, and insofar as we are on a path of a skillful path of growth, of learning, of awakening, of insight, then that path, that spiral path, will be one that potentially leads us to the awakening that the Buddha points to as the possibility in this life. And we can choose that doesn't have to be our goal. We can choose, this is enough for me. I feel pretty happy in my life. I feel pretty contented. I'm in a good relationship, and I like my work well enough. And, I like to do a little bit of meditation, that keeps me balanced. But I'm not necessarily putting in the energy and the effort to really kind of uncover what needs to be uncovered and gain the insights we need to gain, to let go completely, as Ajahn Chah, as his saying, what he said points to that, the end of suffering. So what I'd like to do in the coming few weeks is I'd like next time to look at kind of a broad path of wellness. It's something I've been thinking a lot about, particularly working with some of the things I was dealing with in the last few months. The path of wellness and how important that is and how valuable it is. And I hope it's clear here. I'm not kind of and it's not a verb, but I'm not intending to hierarchize. I'm not intending to say this one's better than that one, because I think all of these are important. Obviously, for myself, I think my commitment ultimately is the freedom that the Buddha's pointing to. I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't believe that, if that wasn't a commitment. But nonetheless, I think the work of therapy is tremendously important. I think secular mindfulness has been this huge, huge gift to the world and to the Dharma, having that expression of it, making it available to more people, many, many more people than would come to a class on Buddhist meditation, or to a Dharma class itself, and I think in terms of freedom from suffering and all the work that's being done around wellness, and whether it's from the point of psychotherapy or more broad approaches to wellness, not necessarily linked directly to therapy, are doing and have done great work, and as I've said, I think are very important on the path to awakening, on that kind of larger, fuller path. So I'll leave it there. I hope that's helpful. Please leave behind on your cushion anything that's not helpful. And Emily, I invite you to lead us some movement. Thank you. And we'll come back and do some little bit of meditation to finish. Thank you.
Let me invite you to stand up and to just shift your weight from foot to foot. Just finding how you balance here, and then open up with swaying. Just being in this moment with all the thoughts that we have just heard. Finding ways to bring those connections together with our bodies, with ourselves. And then open up wide, expanding, lifting your arms up, grasp your left wrist in your right hand, and extend out towards the right, creating a C, if you'd like, just curving over to the right, lengthening the space from the left hip out, through. Inhale up, switch for us, extending out to the left, opening up the right rib cage, breathing in, expanding, exhale, softening your shoulders, allowing, finding what less effort does. Inhale back to center, float your arms down, roll your shoulders gently, slowly, with this moment. Roll them the other way. Then draw your hands up into cactus arms, keeping the elbows up. Lower your arms. Inhale, rise and lower. Inhale, rise up, expand out. Take a look over your left palm, and on an inhale, switch to your right, to the left, to the right. Last time, to the left, to the right. Lower your arms, move your shoulders independently. Find your flexibility. Rolling them the other way. And come to center. Place your hands above your knees and expand out into a flat back, bending at the hip crease, allowing that straight line from your hip out through the top of your head. And with an exhale, gently lower down dropping your head, dropping your shoulders, allowing your gravity to pull you down gently, softly, with each exhale. Finding your breath in your rib cage with the inhale, exhaling out. Then place your hands above your knees, soften your knees, tuck your tailbone under, start stacking your vertebrae up, rising up, bringing your shoulders around your ears. Exhale, lower them. And we'll take a moment to place the right wrist over your left hand, turn your hands together. And now we'll draw a sideways figure eight, the symbol of infinity. And draw it the other way. This crosses, it's said to cross the hemispheres of the brain. Come to center. Place your left wrist on top, switch, and draw it again. Swinging, drawing it the other way. Come to center. Release your arms, expand out, lifting your hands up. Bring them over your head, palms together. Bring them to your heart. Sending energy out to everyone in this group, this Sangha. Then lower your hands to the earth, appreciating its abundance. And with an exhale, whoosh, drawing your arms up overhead, palms together, down to your heart. And take a bow. Thank you for your practice.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you so much. It's lovely. Oh, yeah. So we'll take a couple of minutes. I'm just going to looking through the sharing in the chat. I was asking about what brings us here, and Bettina says connection with like-minded folks. Julia, sense of community and help along the path. I think for many it's that being with others and sharing is a huge part, as the Buddha said, Sangha. It's all of the spiritual path. Denise, it's important for me to recenter myself in spirit. Daily prayer and meditation is essential to my mental health and well-being. Eileen, support in learning skillful ways to reduce reactivity and be a calming, peaceful presence for all. Yeah. Sylvia, yes, greater ease, more emotional peace, community. Diane, connection, the teachings, hope. Deb, being inspired, motivated, informed with my Sangha. Maureen, to find my way home. Heather and Dave, sounds like Russian literature. Sorry, that was gone over my head, I think. Share a whiteboard should appear at bottom of your screen. For some reason, it wasn't. Cassie, I have to leave early. Warm wishes to everyone. Yeah. Neurosis, Carl Jung, neurosis is the avoidance of legitimate suffering. Thank you, Charles Lee. Yeah. Vervaeke, Vervaeke. It's got his things on YouTube. Thank you, thank yous, thank yous, thank yous, thank yous, thank yous, thank yous, thank you for the thank yous. Peace. Yeah, thank you, everyone. Peter says to awaken to that which is limitless, free, awake. Thank you, thank you. Lovely, lovely one to finish with. We will. don't have a lot of time, but if maybe just take a couple of shares, if anyone, obviously, please feel free to share in the chat. But if anyone has something you'd like to share in person using your voice, please raise your hand, and we can maybe take a couple of folks. Let's see, is there Bettina?
Yes. Hi, good morning. And it's so great to have you back again, Hugh. Thank you. It's a wonderful talk and meditation. Now, this is a question, and it might be a big question that wouldn't have time to be answered now, but Ajahn Chah saying, let go a little or let go completely. And my question was, well, when we let go completely, what are we letting go of? What, clinging? And how do I struggle with, well, if I let go completely, which I'm far away from, but if that ever happened, how am I engaged? Like, how do you still be engaged with the world and people if you let go completely? And what are you letting go of? If that makes sense.
No, it's a really important question. And, in a way, I'm not going to try and answer it fully today, but in a way, I mean, all of the teachings of the Buddha Dharma, the Buddha's expression of the Dharma, are really kind of pointing to that. It's pointing to a freedom which it's not a getting rid of our personality. It's not getting rid of our sense of who we are, or how we our proclivities, our everyday ways of being. I think it doesn't turn us into a kind of a cipher. Really, I think that I think the best way of responding is, if you think of who you are or who you have been, the expression of yourself when you have been most fully yourself, most fully alive, most fully connected, most fully balanced in your life. If there is a time that you could think of, and you could kind of think of that, but even much deepening, a greater deepening of that sense of, aliveness, that sense of joy, of connectedness with others, of a real expression of love, for all beings. Maybe you've had some inkling of that in your life. I mean, that is, I encourage you to go along to Peter's, the groups where the beings who've gone a long way along that path of awakening, and the discussions, wonderful discussions there of what does that look like, and it can have many expressions. It's not one expression, but as the Buddha said in that quote, it does have the one taste. It has the taste of freedom. It has a taste of of that ease, of not being troubled. So much of our suffering, and this is both the Dharma and therapy, is unnecessary stuff. It's stuff that is that are add-ons, that come from not bringing things into awareness. That wonderful quote from Jung, what is not brought into consciousness comes to us as fate. We're living our life as fate much of the time because of what we're not bringing into consciousness. In therapy, it's, as you know well, Bettina, and probably all of us know, it's those unconscious patterns that we create, in therapy a lot of focus on attachment patterns, with our parents, with our caregivers, and how we play those out in our lives unconsciously, what we lacked, what we didn't get. But if we can bring them into the light, then some freedom is possible, in the sense that, how do we feel when we let go a little? How do we feel when we let go a lot? Hopefully, most or all of us have had some experience of letting go a lot at some time in our life. There's kind of really the sense of kind of, I feel really alive. I feel really joyful, really spacious. That can give you, I think, a sense. It doesn't, when you're feeling that, you're not feeling like, oh, who am I? I'm, it's the actual opposite of that. You really sense of, I really know who I am and how I fit in with the world. And really, I think the best way of looking at it, perhaps when we're still we're still in the place, we haven't gone beyond suffering, is to see, okay, that potential, just think of that, how that is brought to its fullest expression, fullest human, fullest expression of being a human in the world. How does that look? How does that feel? And I think that's what the Buddha's talking about, what he's pointing to. And until we've experienced that, it's always going to be just a pointing, the finger pointing at the moon, isn't the moon. It's just that pointing. And so everything I've just been saying there is just, again, a kind of this gives you some sense of it, So anyway, it's as you say, Bettina, it's a longer discussion, and a really, really valuable discussion, because insofar as we have fears about what would be, it kind of prevents us from really throwing ourselves fully into the potential, into the practice and into the potential, for finding that freedom. So in a sense, there's a lot of trust in that. There's a lot of trust. You trust a little, it leads you to more trust. And then, we really trust. Anyway, I could go on and talk a lot more about it, but thank you for the question, Bettina. It really is an important one. We'll just take a couple more, and maybe I won't try and I'll just leave them out there, but give folks a chance to share. Hisham, over to you.
Thank you so much. I don't have a camera on, but I have a question. I have been interested, Hugh. First of all, thank you so much for the wonderful talk today, and welcome back. Wonderful to see you. I have been always interested on the impact of technology, either in the bad or good way, on us. And the question I have, giving the emerging to actually social science and biology, and the artificial intelligence and all that machine learning business is merging together, that they not only know what you do outside of your skin, but they have the capability now with the data to know what's going on inside your skin. The question I have is, with these old trends, Hugh, do you think we can get to the point where we can engineer happiness?
I'm skeptical, but I won't answer. I won't attempt to answer the question fully. I think my simple answer for now, Hisham, and thank you for the question, and great to be with you as well, is I won't attempt to really answer the question, but just I would say, I think AI, artificial intelligence, has a lot to offer of value, but I don't see it ultimately, replicating, the human mind, human intelligence, etc. I think artificial intelligence, which includes obviously the computer. I mean, the computer can easily defeat Gary Kasparov, the great and any of the grandmasters in chess, but there's still things that it can't do. I don't know that it'll ever be able to write poetry of or plays as Shakespeare does, or help us to I mean, maybe it may help in different ways, but can replicate the human. I use this term in quotes: the human soul, the human spirit. So it's a great question, but one a little bit beyond today. But maybe we can come back to it. In the future. Thank you, Hisham. And just again, maybe finishing with Eileen, and then please feel free to share anything in the chat. Go ahead, Eileen.
Happy New Year, everybody. Hugh, I would love to hear you. What I've been working a lot on in my practice recently, I'm a psychotherapist, and when I sit and I'm doing meditation, I've been trying to develop my skills of Buddhist investigation versus psychoanalytic analysis. And I would love to hear you maybe in the future talk a little bit about that, like the difference between sitting on the cushion and doing investigation like you would in RAIN versus analyzing something from a psychological perspective. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't claim certainly any special expertise in that area, and others can speak to that. I would recommend Bruce Tiff's book, as an exploration of that relationship. I'll put that in the. I put this in the thing I shared out, but everyone isn't on the lists. So I'm just going to put this in again. In the chat there, the Bruce Tiff's book, Already Free: Buddhism Meets Psychotherapy on the Path of Liberation. I find that his kind of exploration a really, really valuable one, of what he's able to do with psychotherapy and helping people through the tools of psychotherapy, and how he's able to help people, hopefully not everyone, but many of his clients through the spiritual path of Buddhist path of awakening. So I would encourage you. I love the book. I think it's a wonderful book. I've also put in the chat that professor at University of Toronto, John Vervaeke, and his Awakening, his series Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. I find it extremely, extremely powerful. And I'd love to chat with anyone about it if anyone's interested in it. Maybe sometime later in the year as we go along.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Eileen. Let's just take a couple of minutes of meditation, have some announcements, and then we'll finish off today. So just take a moment to pause. It'll be just a short meditation, but an opportunity to check in with ourselves. Notice how what's been shared, what's been discussed, how it's affecting you, how it's in you, perhaps alive in you, maybe reacting to some things or incorporating some thoughts there. Just making space for whatever's here right now. And again, just appreciating us all being together, just awakening together on this path of awakening, whatever we have as our goal, however we might see our own path. Experiencing this power of community, of being together, of supporting each other in our practice. Meeting your own experience right now with kindness and acceptance. We'll finish with this poem from William Stafford, Starting Here. Starting here, what do you want to remember? How sunlight creeps along a shining floor? What scent of old wood hovers? What softened sound from outside fills the air? Will you ever bring a better gift for the world than the breathing respect that you carry wherever you go right now? Are you waiting for time to show you some better thoughts? When you turn around, starting here, lift this new glimpse that you've found. Carry into evening all that you want from this day. This interval you spent reading or hearing this, keep it for life. What can anyone give you greater than now, starting here, right in this room, when you turn around? So thank you, everyone. I'll just finish before passing it to Margaret to share about the centre's offerings, upcoming offerings. I'll just share what I mentioned. Typically, I'll be teaching the first and third weeks of the month, Regina on the fourth week, and we'll have guest teachers on the second week. So I'll be seeing you in 2 weeks. And the other thing I mention is I have a 6-week class beginning on February 21st on Tuesday evenings, and it's on the Buddha's teachings on the 4 foundations of awakening, the Buddha's teachings of freedom. This has been called the most important teaching in the whole of the Pali Canon, the Buddha's written teachings written in the Pali language, from which the Theravadan teachings and the teachings of insight meditation come out, mainly out of that, those written teachings, the first written teachings of the Buddha. So that'll be in beginning on February 21st. I'd love if you can join me for those, join us for those. And mention these sessions, these classes are offered freely, and you're invited, if you're able to make a donation or an offering of dana or generosity. For this class, that the dana goes to me after IMCW takes some administrative costs. And as you know, if you've been to this or other classes, that dana is how the teachings have come down through 25 centuries. And it's a tradition that we hope to continue as the teachings spread more broadly around the world. So thank you for your kindness, for your generosity. Dan has. Thank you all for being here today. It is a lovely day, as you can see from my surroundings here. It's a beautiful day, beautiful day outside. It's really, really great to be back with everyone. It's a joy to see you all, and wish you a lovely, enjoy this lovely day here, wherever you are, and all warm wishes for the year ahead, for this new 2023. As we say about 2022, it could have been a lot worse. Could have been a lot worse. Though it's some heavy things, but blessings to everyone.